And we're here at Outside the Box today, and we're going to be talking to Naghmeh, and she'll be sharing some of the things that are going on right now in her life and what God is doing, and just some new things that are going on. And so we're excited that she's here from Boise, Idaho. I'm going to start with the scripture this morning, and this was actually sent to me this morning through text from my pastor. And he said, as I was praying and reading the word this morning, this verse reminded me of Naghmeh, and so I'd like you to share it with her. So I shared it with her, but I thought, what a better way to start this episode of Outside the Box than by sharing this portion of God's word. So it's found in Psalm 138, verses 6 through 8, and it says, though the Lord be high, yet hath he respect unto the lowly, but the proud he knoweth afar off. Though I walk in the midst of trouble, thou revive me. Thou shalt stretch forth thine hand against the wrath of mine enemies, and thy right hand shall save me. The Lord will perfect that which concerns me. Thy mercy, O Lord, endureth forever. For forsake not the works of thine own hands. And it says there, complete the works of thine own hands. And so this is appropriate today as we share and have Naghmeh share her story with us. So we'll go right into that. I will let you know that I met her, probably it's been about, I don't know how many years you think it is. I think it might be 5, but you think it's less than 5? Mm. About 5 years ago, we began to email and text because of a pair of pink tennis shoes. And many of you know that his girls, one of the things that we do is we give pink tennis shoes away to pastors' wives. And hers was delivered to her to Boise. A friend of ours was at a conference, and Portia said she'd be willing to take them to her. So she flew into Boise, got a rental, and drove to drop them off to Naghmeh. And since then, friendship has sparked, and we've kept in touch through text messaging and emails. And so her having here today has been really an answer to prayer, because we have kept her in our prayers and seen her go through different highs and lows. And I'm just so grateful to God again for that connection and for that impeccable timing of God that just puts you in the right place at the right time to meet the right people. And that's what happened with Naghmeh and his girls. So we're really excited to have her here with us. She'll be sharing at an event tonight. And so we are just excited to have her here. So I'd like you to meet my friend Naghmeh, and we're going to have her share a little bit what's going on in her life. So how are you doing, Naghmeh?
Good. I'm actually recovering from a illness, but doing well.
Oh, good. How are the kids doing?
They're good. My daughter turned 13 a few months ago in junior high. My son's doing well too.
Junior hires, if you're a mom, you know about that, right? You know about having junior high, preteens. That's a whole ministry in itself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so tell us what you've been doing lately. What's been going on? I know there's several things that are going on, but tell us what you've been doing or what's been going on right now.
Well, I, as you know, when we met, I was traveling and advocating. And then in 2015, I took a break and rested. And throughout that time, you continued to message me and encourage me. And it was, I would say, a few years, 3.5 years of wilderness, what I would call it, where God delivered the Israelites from the wilderness, from slavery in Egypt, and they had this season of wilderness, and where I believe they had to depend on God for everything, for food, for water, for, the cloud and the fire, when to move, when to stop. And that's what the Lord was doing in my life, teaching me to pay close attention to His Word, and to really learn to listen to Him and rest and heal from years of travel and advocacy. And it was really good. It was a time of intimacy with the Lord. And, when I stopped my travels, a lot of my identity was wrapped up in those years of advocacy. And I really felt like the Lord wanted me to just find my identity in Him. So it was really good for me. And about a year ago, so about 2.5 years into my time of rest and wilderness, the Lord started bringing broken women into my life. And at that time, I was so tired and broken myself, but He was healing me. But one by one, He brought these women who were going through hard times. And I felt like God was really wanting me to give him my all, even in my time of need,
Wow.
to really give him everything. And so some of these women were in Iran, and they were sharing the gospel there. And I remember just selling my jewelry, just selling a lot of stuff to be able to help them. They'd come out of, they were single moms. Anyways, and then through that, God really birthed a ministry, because these women had reached, as I was teaching them through the Bible, they were reaching hundreds for Christ.
Wow.
This one young lady, she's in her mid-20s. She was taken by the Iranian Intelligence Police Revolutionary Guard, which is a very radical Muslim group. And she was ministering to over 250 women, and she's in her mid-20s.
Wow.
And this poor girl was put in solitary confinement, tortured, and her sisters had to flee Iran because the government was after her sisters. They were all ministering together, the sisters and the mom.
Wow.
And so once they left Iran and they went to the only country they could go to, which was Turkey, I realized Turkey is not a safe country for Christians either. So really, in my effort of trying to help them, this ministry was birthed, because I flew to Washington, D.C. to see what could be done. And I was told over and over again by a government official, you need to have a ministry. You need to have, not a ministry, you need to have an organization to have a more powerful voice for these women. Otherwise, it's just Naghmeh Abedini Panahi coming and advocating, whereas when you come under an organization, there's going to be more movement. So that really pushed me. I didn't want to really start anything, really pushed me to start it. And the woman that it was started with, it had been women that God had brought into my life that had been broken through one way or another. One of them is Miriam Ibrahim, who was on death row in Sudan for her Christian faith.
Wow.
And she refused to deny Christ. And she gave birth in prison. She was actually chained up in prison. And when she gave birth, and her daughter had some complications because of that. And so they're now in America, but we became good friends. And so she has a heart to advocate for those that are in prison for their faith. And so God brought us together, and we've been started the organization. And God brought this girl that has been taken by a radical Muslim group called Boko Haram in Nigeria, and He brought that to our attention. And so we started advocating for her. Her name's Leah Sharibu, and so yeah, it just kind of started because I really didn't want to start an organization, but it just we were kind of told this is how you can be a better advocate for these women. So it's become like much like what you're doing, ministering to broken women. And one thing I did learn was never count something too small.
Yes.
One woman at a time.
That's
sometimes
right.
we want to do great ministries, and we want to be like in front of thousands. And the way God has always worked in my life is, are you faithful with this one little thing I'm giving you?
Yes, that's right.
And as He taught me how to be faithful and to give my all and let go of a lot of the worldly positions I had, He has blessed it. And things have happened that I just never imagined. A lot of movement. We got news that we could bring some of these Iranian persecuted Christians to America, which is a really big deal, because right now
it is a big deal.
It is, yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So
What a journey.
yeah.
But the Lord sustained you, huh? Through it
He
all.
did. He did.
Wow.
And those years of rest are needed. I think in this culture we like to go.
Yes.
And the time of rest and Sabbath and sitting at His feet,
That's
we
good.
think that's like a waste. Sometimes you think I could do more.
Yeah.
And really those times of sitting down at His feet and drawing close to Him is the most important.
Yes.
And you just gotta trust that God's gonna take care of all the things you think you can do
Wow.
during that time. But that's been actually one of the very important things I've learned, to always have Sabbath, always have that day of rest. Because if we're not careful, it just gets eaten up. And God knows we need that time of rest
That's good.
where we're with other believers and we're focused on Him
Yeah.
and we're fellowshipping with Him. It's just a day just dedicated to Him and rest. Yeah.
And that's really true, because I think we do want to keep on going. We feel like we get more done if we stay on, busy and on this routine. And sometimes, we have to take a break from it and just allow God to minister to us and pour into us and give us because our physical bodies can only take so much, and I know because I run on empty most days. I just keep on going, but there's days when God will just remind me, like, no, you need to stop. And when He says that to me, I stop as I think, okay, this is important to the Lord for me to. And He ordained rest. He ordained a day of rest. So that's really good that you saw that, and you can feel like you're wasting time, but if He's in it and He is in that part of our life, in the resting part, He can speak to us more clearly in those moments too.
And He can do in a moment what we can't do in a lifetime.
Yeah,
That's right.
Very
And
true.
so I saw that in my years of advocacy. I was this girl in Boise, Idaho, and within moments I was on the news. I was meeting with President Obama, meeting with Trump, meeting with heads of states of different governments. And so within a moment, God can open doors that, you could work all your life and you can't open those doors.
That's
so,
right.
and you prayed that over me last night, actually. But He can open doors that you would never expect. So it's really trusting Him and seeking Him. And really, I think someone said it last night when we were, that really this life is about us becoming Christ-like and being an example of. We think it's about doing stuff for God, but in the doing, He's actually molding us into the image of His Son.
Yes.
And so it's really about our relationship with Him and how He's shaping us to be a light and salt to this world and for people to come to know Christ.
Yeah.
And
Very true.
so how can we do that? How can we be transformed into the image of Christ if we're not spending time with God,
That's
So
true.
we do have to stop. And those 3.5 years, I think of the Old Testament where Israelites had worked so long and had not given the land rest. And so God gave them like a 7-year Sabbath or something.
Very true. That's a good example.
And I'm thinking, maybe the 3.5 years, because no matter what, and you contacted me a few times during those years and said, would you want to come out? And I said, no, I feel like God's saying,
Yeah.
and there was some interview
I remember
requests
that.
and I just felt like the Lord was like, nope, still time of rest. And it's hard to sit for 3.5 years when you've been running
Yes.
for so long, but it was the best thing that happened. It was the hardest thing. Again, I was like, what am I going to do with my life? And I wanted to, work, but my kids had gone through a very traumatic time. They were super clingy. And my parents were like, no, we'll help you, support you, but we want you to be there for the kids. So I did a lot of volunteer work at their school.
Good.
But it was my time of rest, kind of spending time with the kids. But yeah, it's hard, but it was the best thing because that's where He transforms us. And,
Yes.
and it's-
Re-energizes us.
Yeah.
Refortifies our armor, who we are.
Yes.
So that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Give us
awesome.
strength.
Yes. Yeah, it's wonderful.
So you mentioned the different things that you're doing right now, and we were gonna. So go ahead and give us a little idea of some of the lessons that you feel, maybe even one that you really feel. You talked about the waiting and the resting part, but a lesson that you feel has come through, what you're doing right now. Like you've been in a time of resting, now God is actually opening up doors, but in that waiting room in life, there's some things that we grow personally. Like you see your ministry, God doing something in your ministry and what He's launching you to do, and you'll share a little bit about the foundation after, but personally, like, what is one of the main lessons that you've learned just being in that place with Him? I know you shared with us last night, but some of maybe one of the biggest things that you've learned.
Well, God is so tender and kind, and I was really overwhelmed by God's tenderness and kindness because I grew up in a harsh environment where I wasn't handled with kindness and tenderness by men. But at the same time, God taught me some really hard lessons that if you don't forsake all, including yourself, you're not worthy to be my disciple. And it was in a time of need where God wanted me to give Him my all to help some women. And I haven't shared this very much, but it was a time where I gave Him everything and to help a few women. And I cried over it. I was like, this is my saving. And I had false confidence and trust. And okay, no matter what, I have this. If anything happens, and God's like, okay, let it go. Let it go. And I did it with crying. I'm like, why am I crying over this? And I realized I was putting confidence and trust in things more than God. And in time, it says the woman that gave everything at that time. And God's like, I want you to give everything in your time of need. When I was traveling and people were giving me gifts. Money was coming in, and helping that's great. But it's really in time of need that God really tests your faith.
Yeah.
And so the biggest thing was really He wanted my all. He wanted me to give Him my all and to trust that He was gonna provide, and that Jesus says really some hard things like, if you love anything more than me, including yourself, you're not worthy of me. Like, you're just not worthy to be my disciple. And so even though it was a time of rest and really getting nourished and by God's love and kindness, it was also a time where God was teaching me how to be His disciple and just follow Him and give Him my all. And again, like, not to, a lot of times we think ministry is doing these great things, but God was like, can you take of this broken woman I'm bringing your way? Can you do this one prayer vigil for this 14-year-old girl who was taken by Boko Haram at 14? She's been there almost over 2 years, and she refuses to deny her faith.
Wow.
And they released everyone except her because she refused to deny Christ. And so it's like one little thing. Can you help? You can't change the world, but can you give your all for this one person? And so that's been the other thing, like, just not despise the little things.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times in ministry and in the Christian world, we despise the little things, like, oh, this is too little. You only gave me one coin. What is it called? The coin at that time.
Might.
Jesus gave like 1 and 5 and 2.
Shekel.
Yeah. Anyways, I forget what it's called in the Bible, but shekel. Yeah, it's just like what God gives you 1, and you're like, you only gave me 1. You gave the other person 5. And it's like, are you faithful to this one? Are you going to hide it, or are you going to invest it in my kingdom?
Yeah.
And so never count anything too small. And sometimes, when dealing with broken people, we're like, oh, it's so much work and it's one person.
Yeah.
But it's really God testing you. Are you going to be faithful to that one sheep? And I do believe, the Word of God says, then He gives us more. He says, oh, good, you've been faithful with 1, I'll give you 2. You've been faithful with 2, I'll give you 5. And so that's another thing I learned is, because when I was speaking, it was like crowds and, all of that. And it's God's like, don't despise the little things. Be faithful to the little things I give you to minister, one person at a time. So there's a lot of gold, a lot of things that I learned through this time. That was
That's good. Yeah, because we have to be faithful in the little, because God has to know that we can be trusted, that we steward it well
exactly
in order to give us more. So that's a very good
and
lesson.
to be content in that.
Yes.
I think a lot of times in ministry we're not content. We're like, I want to be this in this mega church and I want to be doing this huge ministry, and God's like, are you content with just tending to one sheep right now?
That's awesome.
And find your contentment in me, not in ministry, not in your title.
Yeah.
But are you going to be faithful in the little thing I give you? And so that's been really good, because I started out like with a lot, and then it just, but to teach me again, like, don't despise the little things. And I want to know your heart. It's for me. It's not for numbers. And, so it was also a time of refinement and testing, really my faith. But there was a lot of tears where God was like, give this up and give that up. And, I think the biggest struggle for me has been health. And recently I realized when I get really sick, I'm just like, all I can focus on is and like, Lord, how can I glorify you in this? But that's been a new thing in my life, has been dealing with health issues and trusting God through that and saying, okay, Lord. And some have been like, sicknesses that come and go, and some have been things that if they don't, like possible precancerous stuff that has been scary. Like, as a mom, I'm thinking, what will happen to my kid? Your mind goes there, and I have to trust God and say, you love my kids more than me. You know better than me, and as long as you want me here to serve, that's good. But to die is Christ. Like, it's to live is Christ, but to die is like I want to live and serve Christ here. But if He takes me, I'm fine, and I have to really. That's one thing God's asking me to surrender is my kids. Because you want to hover over them and be like, okay, I want to, and to really trust that whatever happens, God's got them. And so that's been a huge struggle, is for me, the health stuff has been something I've had to continually give over to the Lord, my fears and things like that. So,
Yeah. We forget about that that when we do have anything that happens to our body, right away we go there, we go to that place of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen. But trusting him even in those issues, even with our health, it's really trusting, because he holds our life in his hands, and to live is Christ, really, and to die is only gain. So we're in a win-win situation.
Yeah.
But we don't see it that way. We're human. We want to live forever and see our grandkids get married or whatever.
Yeah, there's always something you want to.
Yeah.
I was telling my daughter, I was like, if Jesus comes back, with all the recent war stuff in Iran, and there was, talking of Christ coming back, and I was like, oh, that would be so great. And my daughter, she's 13, she's like, I need to grow up. I want to get married. I want to have kids. Like, she had so many things she wanted to do. I'm like, oh, honey, the older you get there, you're like, it's not worth it. Like, just come back. Jesus, just come back. But it's interesting. There's so much especially, there's so much you can kind of be attached to this world. I want to see this. I want to see that. I want to see my kids, get married or grandkids. But ultimately, it's to die is gain. It's, but it's interesting, at a young age, you don't want to hear that. You don't want Christ coming back. You're like, I haven't experienced any of this yet. Yes. It was funny. I was like, I know what you feel. I was in your place. And when I was younger, I was like, oh, I gotta see what happens in my life. And,
Yes, wow. Well, tell us a little bit about your, the Pray for Leah and also the Taft campaign.
Yeah, so Pray for Leah, like I said, people... actually, Miriam Ibrahim, the person who started this organization with me, brought her to my attention. She said, me and my kids have been praying for this girl, and we've been crying for her. She was abducted by Boko Haram at her school in Nigeria, and there was like 100 girls that were taken, and Leah, and the Nigerian government negotiated to get all the girls back, and Leah was the only one that didn't go back, and they asked why, and they said, all the girls said, right before they put all the girls on the bus, right before they said, they were making each person denounce their faith if they were Christian. Some of them were Muslim. Wow. And Leah was like, I'm not going to do that. They said, you're not going to go on that bus if you don't deny Christ. And she said, I'm not going to do that. And she quickly wrote a note to her mother. I forget the exact words, but it was, I know you miss me, and I miss you, but, I will see you one day, whether on this earth or in heaven. And it was just an encouraging word from a 14-year-old.
Wow.
And so when I heard her story, I said, it takes a lot to do a prayer vigil. And so we just started doing one. And God just opened amazing doors. We did a prayer vigil in Washington, D.C., Senator Ted Cruz did an event for her, which was pretty amazing with his schedule.
I saw that, yeah.
And then Senator Rubio got involved. He started tweeting and started advocating for her. She was adopted by YouServe, Tony Perkins, who also does the FRC. And so there's just a lot of movement that happened. We know that her release is in God's hand. I mean, her poor mom, I got to see her at the prayer vigil, and she can't smile. I mean, every moment is like, what is my daughter enduring? Is she being tortured? Is she being raped? Is she when she eats, what is my daughter eating? When she sleeps, where is my daughter sleeping? And it was just hard. I couldn't see, she would not smile the whole time. I was there with her the whole week. And you could see her anxious, like, my daughter's not with me. And
the anger.
And not only she's not with her, she's with these radical terrorists. And so, so we did a prayer vigil for her. And, TAF is the ministry we started. It's called, it's Arabic. It's called Tahrir al-Nisa. And my co-founder, Miriam Ibrahim, came up with it. She speaks Arabic. She's from Sudan. I don't. But Tahrir means freedom, and al-Nisa means woman. Oh, okay. So our hope was that as God delivered us, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. As God delivered us, we would be a tool in God's hand to deliver other women, kind of like the vision God gave you in the trenches. But for us, it was more than just the Christian woman. It was helping women in general, because I worked a lot with refugee women, Muslim women in my town, Boise, and I have been able to share Christ with them. And so our hope was that as we rescue women of all faiths, that it would be because we are registered as a Christian organization, we can share our faith.
Oh, good.
So as we, there's a girl in Iran right now we're advocating for. We're, behind the scenes. She was in prison. She's Kurdish Muslim. She was a, human rights advocate anyways, but we were able to really be a witness to her and her entire family because we're a Christian organization, helping and advocating.
Yeah.
So our goal was not just to focus on necessarily Christian persecution, which that's part of it,
Yes.
but any broken woman going through anything. It could be religious persecution, abuse of power, whether in a home or a country, and women are the most vulnerable because usually those in power are not women. And so whether it's domestic violence, whatever it is that's this broken person's coming to us, is for us to help them and minister to women. So that's what the ministry is about. It just started, but God has just, again, opened amazing doors. We had these Iranian women who fled Iran because of their faith. We had this senator in Tennessee say, I'll try to get him here, this really well-known senator. And then this church, Grace Chapel, the pastor sponsored them. Wow. And he is the governor's pastor. And he also, the day that he heard about this family and said, I'm going to help, he was meeting with Secretary of State Pompeo.
Oh, wow.
And so it was just, and he brought their case straight to the Secretary of State. And we're like, how does God just, the doors.
The connections that God makes, right?
I couldn't have made it.
Exactly.
I would have never, this pastor was visiting the senator's office and heard about this. And he said, and then to know this pastor is connected to the governor and connected to the Secretary of State. It was just pretty amazing stuff. Yeah. So that's one example. But just to be a new organization and then see these crazy open doors, with,
we know that.
Incredible.
Yeah,
Incredible,
it's God's hand helping broken women, kind of like your story of how you're just faithful to something and God just keeps opening different doors.
I think the most amazing thing for me is the impeccable timing of God, and how He orchestrates meetings with people. And in my lifetime, I feel that one of the things that I desire to do is always follow His lead and align myself with the Holy Spirit, because I want to be a part of what God's doing. And in order to do that, you have to align yourself so that He is able to, you're included in that orchestration. You're not like, I am too busy for that. And He still does it, but it's, a little more strained. But when I've seen Him move in those ways where He orchestrates a meeting, or like even us meeting you, and just how God does things, and it's so right on, and it's perfect timing, and everything is just where it needs to be. And I want to be a part of that. I want to be where God wants me to be at all times. And maybe that seems impossible, but if you acknowledge Him and ask Him every day when you wake up, I say, Lord, just let me be where I need to be and do what I need to do for your kingdom's glory. And so sometimes it's just a normal day. I don't feel like I did anything special or spectacular, but I followed His lead. And to me, that's what God expects, is us to follow His lead and to be available to Him. And so I totally get that, how He would put all those people at that place so quickly.
I know. Because
it was a message that needed to be said, needed to be spoken. And I'm so grateful that God has given you that voice and for these kind of things, like for Pray for Leah, and this new venture with this ministry, this foundation. I think it's amazing, and I totally, we totally stand by you. And if you want more information about that, you could get it on the screen, and find out about it. Get involved, and what would you say to someone today that wants to get involved in her community, but doesn't feel like she even knows where to start? You talked about how God just showed you, and you just, He brought people to you, and you started one person at a time, and it grew from there. Share maybe a little bit about that to someone that may be watching and saying, man, I want to do something. How come I don't ever get called to do anything like that? But there's something for all of us to do.
I think that Jesus said that the harvest is plenty, and we are always looking, saying, where's the harvest? And Jesus said there's plenty. He said it's the workers are few.
Yes.
And the solution He gave us of what to do, He said pray. And so it starts with prayer. When I started, about a year ago, outreach with the refugees in my city, I just would pray once a week. Just that day I would set aside for prayer. And I would go out and, like you said, make yourself available to the Lord. And, okay, Lord, who do you want me to talk to? And opportunities. There was one neighborhood that a few churches were helping. It was a poor neighborhood. And so I stepped in, started digging and planting, and I got to know the refugees there. And so it's really, prayer is the big one. A lot of times we want to do.
Yeah.
But it's sit at his feet and pray.
Mhm.
And then he will make yourself available. And then, to those people who are, have gone through a lot of heartbreak and suffering, I do want to say that God is using all of that to draw you closer to him. Because a lot of times we can't make sense of suffering and hardship. And you want to serve, but you're in a place where you're in your own health crisis or financial crisis or family crisis, your kids, your marriage, whatever it is, there's some kind of a suffering. We don't know what to do with it, because in this culture, in the American culture, it's so different than Christians all over the world. Because Christians all over the world know, if I follow Christ, I will lose my life. I will lose everything. But in this culture, it's almost like if you follow Christ, you could get rich and you could, but in this culture, we don't know what to do with suffering. Like, is God mad at me? Whereas in the other cultures, it's just given. You follow Christ and you suffer. And he's worth it. And so we don't know what to do with suffering in this culture. And, suffering is a tool for God to call you to himself and to really say, this world's not worth it. It's like, Paul says, I've counted all as loss, to really detach you, take your eyes off of this world and refocus you back to Christ. So, in times of suffering and hardship, or even in times of confusion, why is God not doing great things in my life? What should I do? It's really God saying, come to me. You have all these questions, come to me. How much do we worry and try to figure out, talk on the phone, versus how much are we going to him in prayer?
Yeah.
And so go to him in prayer, draw close to him, and he's going to make things clear. He's not a God of confusion. He will make your path clear. He promises that. As we trust in him, he will make our path clear. And it's one step at a time. Help this person, do this. And before you know it, you end up in a ministry like I was. I didn't ever expect to get back up and advocate. I wanted to just have a normal life in Boise, and God kept bringing people that, can you help her? But it's really, anytime there's confusion in your life, there's suffering, God is saying, come to me. And that's what one of my favorite verses is, where Jesus says, come to me all who you're weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest.
Yes.
So
true. Thank you for being so transparent and real with us. And we're going to be praying for Leah. And again, she shared that she's been in this imprisonment for almost over 2 years now. So we're going to pray for, and her mother. My heart went out to when I saw the pictures. And, for a mother, that's probably one of the worst nightmares, to have your child alive but not with you, somewhere else, especially in danger like she is. So we'd ask that you pray for Leah also, and get involved if you want more information. Look on the screen. And also for TAF, that's a new foundation that's dealing with violence, or just against women, just violence against women, and domestic, or even in the religious world, there's people being persecuted and abused. So there's a lot to pray for. We sometimes get entangled with just our own lives, but there's people out there in our world that are going through some really tough things. And so make those are 2 prayer requests that you can pray for every day: TAF and Leah, and you'll be doing a world of good. And just prayer is the most, I think, for all of us here. I know Yolie's an amazing prayer warrior, and Naghmeh talked about how important it is to pray and start everything in prayer, and I feel that way too. But if we could say anything to you today, it would be just, remember that to start doing something, remember that you don't have to start big. Start with your neighbor, someone at church that looks like they're lonely. Pastor Bob from the Cost Church would always say to the congregation, do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. And that's a good rule to live by. If you can start with just one friend, one person, one stranger that, may need your help with something, start there. And you never know what God will have you doing. But if it's just that one person for a year, stick with it. Stay consistent. Stay constant. And just align yourselves. For my part, align yourselves with His will, with the Holy Spirit, and God will work on your behalf to accomplish your purpose in this life. God bless you. We love you, and we're so grateful for Naghmeh being here, and we are very, very excited for you to get to know her a little bit better and continue to pray for her. God bless you.
God bless you.